Have you ever traveled through time? We do it every day.
Asgardia is a country with a population of more than 1 million people from more than 200 countries on Earth. Asgardia gives everyone equal opportunities, no matter what their earthly status is.
It is possible to create and live in the future right now. Are you ready? Forward progress is the solution to the entire human race. Our mission is to bridge new horizons. In Asgardia, there is no limit to the universal development in the fields of technology, finance, and arts. Asgardia is a new space and digital economy which creates opportunities for the global economy. We deliver innovations. Do you want to get on board with us? We are developing various kinds of digital businesses, attracting them to the Asgardia platform that can be backed by the means of our umbrella, i.e. franchising of the Asgardia brand. We can not only attract investments into space programs from prominent institutional investors, but also affordable amounts from the citizens of Asgardia. We comprise of more than 1 million people.
Asgardia is a chance to realize one's dream. This is a dream-driven space nation. Asgardia is a chance to belong to a community of free-thinking enthusiasts, goal-driven dreamers, and fearless innovators, theorists, and scientists.
We are the first space nation. One humanity, one unity.
Asgardia.
We are creating
the future.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. Thank you for joining us today for a new webinar here in Asgardia.
Please remember to take all your belongings.
Okay, so I would like to thank, first of all, the fellow panelists who are here with me today. Thank you for joining. We have Lembit Opik, the Chair of Parliament, Cheryl Gallagher, the Minister of Culture, and Floris Witz, which is the Minister of Science. Thank you all for being here. Our special guest today is none other than Dr. Mark Wagner, who is also an Asgardian, has been with us in Asgardia for 2 years. But he's also something more than that. He's the president of Space Prize, which is a non-profit organization focused on promoting STEM education and increasing the representation of women in aerospace careers. He also teaches the Space Education Graduate Certificate program at Kepler Space Institute. He's the associate editor for the Journal of Space Philosophy. In addition, he's the founder of ARES Learning Project, which provides a vision for schools that prepare students with the skill sets and mindsets they need to be successful in the growing space economy and in humans rapidly approaching what I call the multi-planet future. It may look strange for many, but we do leave this reality. The multi-planet future is very close. Mark Wagner, to get back to our special guest, is also a PhD in educational technology and master's degree in cross-cultural education. He also holds a graduate certificate in space education and space philosophy. He is the author of More Now, a message from the future for the educators of today, and Space Education, Preparing Students for Humanity's Multi-Planet Future, a book that has been released in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. Without any elongations in our introduction, Mark Wagner, welcome, and thank you for accepting to be with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Dan.
Yes, we had the pleasure to meet you just a couple of weeks ago, I think. Was that when you organized the Space Education Symposium, which was an absolute amazing event, bringing together people from all the space research areas, including astronauts, well, I would call them cosmonauts. We'll have a chat about that linguistically, that cosmonauts rather than astronauts, but also researchers and people involved in space research. And that was a tremendous success, and I want to congratulate you again for that. And again, having you here now feels like we have some stuff to catch up now. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, and thanks for presenting at that event too. It was fantastic to have you there.
Thank you. So, can we hear about your endeavor, your ARES learning endeavor, ARES learning project? What it is? How did you come up with it? You're one of its co-founders, and how can people take advantage of such a platform?
Sure, thanks. I could talk about this all day, so let me know if you need to cut me off or give me a time limit. But that's an interesting way you asked the question in terms of, how did we come to ARES? In brief, though, ARES is a vision for a new kind of high school that uses a focus on space exploration as its foundation. And it's what it's about. I think of it as being I think of ARES as a solution at the intersection of three problems. So one problem is the critical need for more engaging schools today. Unquestionably, we have a problem with student engagement and staff burnout. I saw recently 40% of New York City public high school students are chronically absent post-COVID, and 70% of LAUSD teachers report burnout and the desire to leave the profession. So we have to engage students and teachers, and it just so happens space is pretty exciting right now with what's happening in commercial space and what's happening internationally in space. We're really on the cusp of a lot of very, very big changes. I mean, as you guys know, just a few technologies like the fact that you know, Starship can land anywhere in the world in 90 minutes, and Starlink can provide broadband internet anywhere in the world, and we have Earth monitoring in 4K live real time 24/7. These technologies are going to change pretty much every industry you can imagine. So one of the big questions we have is how are we preparing kids for that? So that's the second solution we provide is workforce development for the growing space economy. And then the third, and this is kind of the magic to making this long-time vision really happen, is there's this massive untapped market of ideas, this potential of student innovation and student entrepreneurship. If you look in the US, according to census data, 16% of US adults are entrepreneurs, but 60% of eighth graders say they want to own their own business. So somewhere high school is drumming that out of them. And we want to completely flip that around and take advantage of that gap to harness teenage innovation and empower teenage entrepreneurship. We see stories in the headlines of teenagers that launch unicorn companies, but they have to leave school to do it. So we're saying, what if we actually support them in doing that at school, provide the skill sets and mindsets they need to be successful entrepreneurs. And by the way, they're very similar to the skill sets and mindsets they need to be successful space explorers and to be successful in a rapidly changing, unpredictable future and prepare kids with that instead. So I can go into a lot more detail, but that's the overall vision. The pieces have come together over 20 years in the education technology field and as a lifelong space enthusiast, but that's the gist of it, and we can go in whatever direction you guys want to discuss.
Cool. Just pick up a question. Matthew is asking us on a Q&A. Do you believe we will have people who will work on exotic technologies such as gravity overcoming engines?
Oh, that's an interesting specific question. And I was ready for it to go so many different ways. Some of the resources I have to share, and I have tons of free space education resources to share when the time's right for that. And some of them are looking forward to teaching kids on other planets. So I thought you might be going there with that question. But with respect to exotic technologies like gravity overcoming engines, would we be doing that in a high school in, say, 2023? I am certain kids will want to. For sure. Like, kids come up with these crazy magic wand ideas all the time. The ones that we can sort of make happen might be a little more modest. But one of the examples I love to point at is, if you think about the biggest, most wicked, challenging problems on Earth, they usually have to do with the environment. And if you think about the thousands of square miles of plastic in the Pacific Ocean, for instance, there's a teenager, came up with the idea of towing a kilometer-long boom behind a boat, scooping up that plastic with something like whale baleen right in the back, and then recycling it. And it turns out now, I think it's 4 or 5 years later, that's actually being used in the Pacific, and it's actually profitable because they're recycling and reusing the plastic. So kids can absolutely solve and attack really, really big problems. And I met a team of guys at New Worlds in Texas a couple of weeks ago who are working with NASA scientists who have theoretically demonstrated a warp bubble. So yeah, anything's possible, I think, in the coming generation, and it might just be teenagers doing it.
Yeah. I would like to get back to ARES and put it in this way. I mean, something that caught my attention big time was the fact that your education school, your project is also available online. The reason why I'm asking this is because here in Asgardia, and I think in most of the new modern education platforms, we are facing this problem of reaching masses, reaching people all over the world in different of the time zone. And for that, despite all odds, pandemics had its good, taught us to use the online system, communication system. So what is available? What is the potential, the online potential of ARES learning?
It's a good question, and I hope the answer isn't too disappointing. I've got some other opportunities for you, but we were looking at launching ARES right before the pandemic hit, is when we first started looking at it seriously. The vision's been growing over the last 10 years, but kind of the pieces started to come together right before the pandemic. And that was, of course, a bad time to launch a school. And ultimately, we lost our first location. So we looked real hard in the meantime at doing it as a virtual program, which is possible in part. A lot of it you could do. But now that we have the opportunity to do it as a physical campus again, and have a maker space where kids can come together physically and build things and fly them and test them and that sort of thing, we're most interested in doing it physical and then scaling to multiple sites. That said, there's a ton of space education resources that I can share with the listeners and participants. One of which, particularly for adults, is you mentioned my association with Kepler Space Institute. I do teach the graduate program in space education there, which is ideal for educators, but also enthusiasts that are interested in that. I imagine Asgardians might fall into both groups, but I can share links here as well. If you go to ksiEDU.org, they also have a bunch of short courses that they're offering now, sort of 6-week courses. And I've got one on space education there as well, called Preparing Today's Students for the Growing Space Economy and Humanity's Multi-Planet Future. So that's something that right now anybody that's participating can sign up for. If you go there at this moment, it's got a wait list, but we're going to launch a cohort in January. So you can either reach out to me directly or you can sign up there.
Okay, so we will collect all those links that you have put already in the chat, Dr. Wagner, and we will share them with the people who cannot see the chat, who are now present on Asgardia TV, for instance. So they will become available very soon on Asgardia.space website. So bear with us. Yeah, Cheryl had a hand put up, so please do say.
Well, I met Mark also at the New Worlds conference here in Austin, and I also thought the warp bubble thing was totally awesome to see that progress on that level. But when it comes to your program, I remember that you had an interesting video of the facilities that you're currently, was that what we saw during your presentation?
Oh, that's interesting. There was such a short presentation at New Worlds. I don't recall having a video in it, but there is
maybe it was just photographs of
that's possible.
the facility.
Yeah. So
I didn't know if you wanted to share that with us, because I thought that was particularly nice.
Interesting. No, so there's two things. We did have a facility here that was also the EdTech team offices, my education technology professional development company. And that was sort of designed, inspired by places like Google's offices and Facebook's offices, like highly effective collaborative workspaces, but also schools that inspired us. So one of the things that we realized is we were working with what we wound up calling future-ready schools around the globe, and we were a big part of the Obama administration's launching of the Future Ready Schools Initiative back in 2014. But when we were building our own framework around it, one of the pieces we realized was inspiring spaces, spaces that are beautiful, comfortable, encourage kids to kind of come out of their shell, right? And spaces that represent or reflect the culture of learning you want to have in the school. So where a typical school might have kids in rows and 30% of the classroom committed to the teacher at the front, we're much more interested in spaces that reflect a collaborative, student-centered learning environment. So they'll look a lot more like a living room or a coffee shop than they do a classroom with kids sitting in rows, for sure. And then we have a partnership with the Urban Workshop here in Costa Mesa, neighboring us in Irvine, and they have a massive warehouse right by the airport. We're not allowed to fly drones outside, but we can fly. It's big enough we can fly drones inside, and that's everything that schools don't have anymore in terms of wood shops and 3D printers and all of the machining tools that you would want kids to have access to build their own rockets and electric cars and things like that.
Excellent. Yeah, I remember those spaces and I was inspired. So, it sounds like you're headed in the right direction with that. I was curious, you said a few things that, a few words that come up when I'm talking often, and some of those had to do with collaboration. And the other one I was going to ask you about was modules. As these kids interact and as you have the schools around the world, can you speak to a little bit about space citizenship? Like what it means to be a space citizen and the attributes of space citizen. As you know, I'm Minister of Culture, so you're talking about the culture of school and transforming that, and that's a very important part of our education system going forward, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe the two ways I can answer a question about culture. One is to look at what we call the skill sets and mindsets that kids will need to be successful. We can definitely drill down into that. And the other is to look at space philosophy. And we also know each other, of course, through the Overview Roundtable and Frank White's community that he's built in his work. And when I did get involved with Kepler Space Institute, initially that was as a student or a scholar, Kepler scholar in their program, their space philosophy program. So the idea of bringing the humanities to space is only happening in a few niche places right now. Kepler is one of them. I think Asgardia is one of them. You don't see this in most space-focused programs, but it's important because ethics and governance, alternative modes of governance are becoming increasingly important. I think we have to think about that as we move to the stars. But we're looking also at what skill sets and mindsets can we optimize for in a school, rather than regurgitation of information that the teacher has provided, because we have Google for that now. So we're looking at things like an explorer's mindset. And National Geographic has some really great material around this and great programs based on this. But any school can do it. Helping kids connect with their love of discovery, helping them become comfortable with the unknown, building in them the idea that the solution to their problems are out there if they persevere. And it's just sort of abundance mindset that explorers have to take as they head into the wilderness, right? And they might be wrong, but but their best chance of being successful is to presume they're right. So the explorer's mindset is a big one. Moonshot thinking, we took out of our work with Google and folks in Silicon Valley, and obviously it's inspired by Kennedy and the original moonshot, but it goes back further to Polynesian islanders getting in a dugout canoe and deciding to go that way, as Astro Teller says, right? Or maybe that was Rich Duvall, but they both worked at Google's X Lab. The idea behind moonshot thinking is not just thinking in an iterative way. How can we make things better? How can we make a slightly better government than today? But how might we start over? How might we go, not from 25 to 35 miles a gallon, but how do we go to 500 miles a gallon? You have to start over, right? So that moonshot thinking is one of them. And I see the hand, Flores, too. I'll wrap up with just a couple others. On the back of moonshot thinking, we like to share design methods or design thinking. So helping kids then tackle the problem, brainstorm or ideate potential solutions, prototype them, test them, and continue iterating on that. We build in a lot of synthesis and not just bringing together different domains, including the humanities, but ethical dimensions to those and challenges. And hat tip to Josh Don at Astor School at SpaceX for his focus on always including an ethical dimension in their scenarios. And then the fifth one is reflection. We use a concept called Hansei, inspired by our roots in Hawaii and with Japanese influence, which is essentially like relentless self-reflection, thinking about what went well, but what went wrong, and what can we do better next time. So those are just kind of 5 mindsets that we really focus on that we think are, I mean, nothing's future-proof, but those are ideal for preparing kids for a rapidly changing, unpredictable future that may not even be on Earth.
It's a very, very, very interesting thing, and we'll get back to it. Let's see. I see 2 people raising hands, and I would like to offer to ask Floris to intervene, because Floris is our Minister of Science, and I'm sure his interest in today's meeting was really important to us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Actually, I'm also professor of physics, so I'm teaching physics at university on the first-year students, so those who are really new to it. And my experience is that what is very important is the proof of the pudding is the eating. So you can explain a lot of things, but if you demonstrate and you let the students find out themselves by experiments, that is absolutely so much more pivotal for their understanding. So how do you see this concept of, okay, you have books, etc., text, nice movies, but in the end, experience yourself is pivotal. How do you look at that challenge?
Man, thanks for asking that question. I'm going to start it by saying you don't need 6 hours a day sitting in rows to learn the core curriculum. One of the things we learned from the pandemic and emergency distance learning was that kids who had the right technology and had the right support could do that in like 2 hours a day. So that's the way our schedule is built. First 2 hours a day, we're knocking out the core curriculum that's required in California. And we do that on a blended, online system where kids learn at their own pace, and the staff and faculty are available for tutorials as needed. The rest of the day, you get to do something more meaningful. And we have a whole Launchpad curriculum that we like to say covers all the courses we would have liked to have had before we were in college. But it's really a shot in the arm for the kids, exposure to other domains, everything from like anthropology to astrophysics. And that's the afternoons in the front part of the week. In the back half of the week, we're doing the Moonshot Lab, which is something we did in Hawaii with the King Kamehameha Foundation 3 years previous to COVID as something of a proof of concept. And it was spectacular. Kids came to us from the local schools, 20% of their time, so 1 day a week at that time. And the idea was we asked them, what problem do you want to solve? And you've got all of the resources of the Moonshot Lab at your disposal. And kids really did launch businesses and launch nonprofits, and they put environmental sensors in the ocean that are still transmitting data today. And they built emergency equipment that you could land with via drone into the water where you couldn't even get with a jet ski and high surf, that kind of thing. So these were very like culturally embedded, context dependent solutions. And what we're looking at doing is using that same approach, which works all over the world in innovative schools where they do Genius Hour 20% time, but using that same approach in the Moonshot Lab to actually focus on space exploration and space entrepreneurship. That then leads into the ARES Accelerator, where kids actually have a startup accelerator experience. So they're getting hands-on entrepreneurial experience as well. And for those ideas that are in the Moonshot Lab that are good and are monetizable, we graduate those into the accelerator where they get support in starting a company and leading a company. Take advantage of those 60% of incoming freshmen that want to own their own company, right?
Yeah, thank you. So Lembit is also raising the hand, please.
Hi, really interesting to hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I've got 3 thoughts and then a question. The first one is somebody who gets to a university level of education actually spends less than 1.5 years in total. You have to didn't do any sleeping or anything, studying. And that means that a graduate has actually studied as a total of about 80 weeks in a whole lifetime. And I think that's not very much. Leads me to my second question. The most successful people are self-motivated to do a lot more than that. And thirdly, it seems to me that since we're just on our tiny little planet Earth, and there's an entire universe, most of which we can't even see, we know all that's nothing. So the question is, how do we fulfill what I think is the potential of the human race, which is to learn a lot more across the hopefully millions of years ahead, but do enough in the next 100 or 200 years to actually earn the rest? And the reason I ask that is because there are times when I feel, perhaps because I live in the United Kingdom and we change our prime minister every 2 months, that I sometimes think that there's a risk that we settle into passivity, just living here on Earth and thinking everything else is impossible. So we watch Elon Musk and we watch Artemis and all these things happening, but most people don't relate to it. They think that's something else. Whereas now most people in the West, though actually only 7% of the human race has ever flown in a plane, somehow that's changed. So the question for me to you is, can we make a step change that makes people actually realize how little we know and want to know enough to really make it successful in space, make the human race successful in space in the next 40 years?
Boy, I think so, and I hope so. But that's certainly a tough nut to crack, because you're talking about, I think it's very easy to do on a small scale. Like I think probably everybody on this call and probably everybody watching is already thinks the way you do, right? But how do you scale that? And that's part of what we're trying to do with ARES, and we want to, scale it to multiple campuses in the coming years. But one thing that's encouraging to me, and space is again exciting in the news right now, but one thing that's encouraging to me is Unistellar, the telescope company, released a study earlier this year that said 93% of U.S. students are interested in space. They if I recall, they hired a research company. They polled 2,500 kids of various ages and demographics and that kind of thing. But 93% of kids are excited about space. But nearly as many teachers have no idea how to engage them around it. So that's one big thing we can change. That's where I think space education is A, really important, and B, right at the cusp of exploding. And we can, an organization like Asgardia can do a lot to support that and spread it into, community schools wherever all of your members and Asgardians live, right? And I think just talking to people about it is a great way to do it. You also, I think, are touching on the importance of lifelong learning. We don't, at the same time that you can have somebody like Elon Musk saying, I don't care about your degree if you're passionate about solving problems, right? This is also coming from somebody who has a PhD also and graduate certificates after that. Lifelong learning, whether it's formal or not, is critically important. And we're not, obviously the economy has moved on from a place where someone can sit in the same job for 30 years or 50 years and retire. People are changing jobs 10, 15 times in a lifetime or more. So those skill sets and mindsets I mentioned are a big part of that. If we have a greater and greater percentage of the populace that's uncomfortable with the unknown and knows how to design and iterate their solutions to things, and is considering issues of culture and ethics, and they're reflecting on them, like all of that we're baking into our programs are things that I think can help with what you're talking about. And the more we can sort of scale them and evangelize, the better. And this might be another opportunity to share a free resource that you can use with kids. With my work with Space Prize, which is a nonprofit, the contests are primarily focused on young women, but the curriculum we created is for students, educators, and enthusiasts anywhere. So another one of those links we can share is spaceprize.org/education. And what you'll find is a online textbook. We built it at CK12, which is essentially an open education resource, but it's got chapters on not just, introduction to space science and the history of space exploration, but a lot of things we're talking about now, like why is space important to people on the Earth? And what are the skill sets and mindsets that you need? And what's happening in the new space economy? and more far-reaching philosophical issues like, escaping existential threats and perhaps living up to higher aspirations of shepherding life through the solar system and beyond. So it's a really ambitious curriculum, but spaceprize.org/education, that's freely available right now. You can use yourselves or with kids anywhere. And if you print it out as a PDF, which I don't recommend, it's got thousands of links in it. But if you print it out as a PDF, it's 550 pages. So this is a legit textbook, but on the web, linked out to National Geographic and NASA and JPL and elsewhere. So highly recommend that. And I recommend sharing it again with your community schools and teachers who might be able to use it with kids.
Thank you.
Can I just add
and you
one?
touched. Sorry, yes. I didn't know if that hand was just forgotten there.
No, I'll put it down in a moment. Just two things. First of all, it seems to me that, not for now, but it would be fantastic to actually put some of that into the Asgardia domain. Maybe Dan's doing this already, and see who comes in. And the last thing was, tonight I'm meeting the team who are launching the first ever British launched satellite into space. They're not launching it tonight, but I'm meeting them tonight. And it seems to me that by connecting the hardware events with the software education is what Apollo did so well. We can do again.
Yeah, absolutely. Rocket launches are exciting and inspiring, and using them as an opportunity to talk about this stuff with kids is critical. And there's so much opportunity right now. It's every day there's exciting stuff happening in the news, whether it's biofuels for rockets or launching rockets with magnets like Spin is doing. It's never mind the exciting human rated stuff that's happening right now. I mean, Orion's out there right now further than any human rated starship's been in ever, right? I think they broke the Apollo record. So it's so much to come back and talk to your kids about.
I'm glad you touched base with a lot of stuff that we cherish here in Asgardia, and in particular how to overcome the downfalls of the mainstream media. And I would like here to mention that our Prime Minister Leonard Levin is also watching us and is asking a question in a Q&A. Would you pinpoint one biggest controversy in the modern mainstream education? How would you remedy if it was up to you?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I mean, I've spent my whole career on that, and it's not easy. Coming out of 20 years helping teachers learn education technology, the overwhelming feeling along the way is one of resistance. And perhaps for good reason, our education system is designed rather conservatively to pass on culture of the past, right? Which we need to do. But it's not as good at embracing the future. If you look at Seymour Papert, was an MIT researcher who created the Logo computer language and some really great things that kids could do with computers back in the 80s. And he thought computers were going to change education. And people have thought that, of course, a lot of times over the years. But by the 90s, he kind of gave up because there was this immune system response in schools that sort of said, oh, computers in the classroom, that's really great. Let's put that over here in a computer lab and make a class around it and a curriculum with a final exam and a grade, right? So instead of changing everything, it just became another course. And I think over time, of course, and especially the decade prior to COVID, even though we felt that resistance all the way along the way, sure enough, things moved along. We had enough computers and enough know-how out there to do emergency distance learning in a lot of the world during the pandemic. And that was a real sign that, like, hey, we really have moved somewhere in the last 30, 40 years. But I think we're seeing similar resistance with the issues we're talking about today, that schools don't necessarily want to talk. Like, everybody says, wow, look what's happening with SpaceX, and look what's happening in general in the space economy that's booming. It's a $400 billion economy, projected to be $1 trillion economy in 10 years. Never mind $1 trillion for asteroid mining and another $1 trillion for space solar power. Like, people know these things are coming, but when you go talk to schools, they're like, no, like we're still recovering from COVID. That's cool, but my teachers don't want to do that, or the union wouldn't let us, or whatever it would be. Like they're very resistant to new and very resistant to change. As far as they've come in my career, they're still very resistant. So I think that sort of cultural resistance, it's not just our schools, is the hardest thing to overcome. And the negative, whether it's in a teacher lounge or it's in the newspaper or it's on CNN or whatever, like the negative narratives are hard to overcome. And anything we can do to produce and amplify a different narrative is important. And that's one way that I think Asgardia is great, because there's a lot of very active citizens and out there sharing this. For the roundtable where Cheryl and I met with Frank, it was just about a year ago, we launched a blog with that specific purpose, so that people would, we could produce a counter narrative and amplify each other's writing from the blog. So I'll drop that link in here too, but it's, I think it's medium/@humanspace program. So medium.com/@humanspace program. Really great writing there, happening on a lot of these topics, from governance to education and you name it, space ethics and so on. And I should also mention the Journal of Space Philosophy, which Dan mentioned at the beginning. A lot of these issues are in there as well, so I'll drop that link in here too. But KeplerSpaceInstitute.com/JSP for Journal of Space Philosophy. We just had our 10-year anniversary issue, which is a crazy milestone. I think the best thing about the Journal of Space Philosophy is that it exists. And the quality's gone like this over the years, but I'm really proud of the last few issues that we've done since I came on as an associate editor, and they cover a lot of what you guys are talking about. And I think there's a lot of alignment with Asgardia, and I know Asgardia has similar publications too, but happy to share my work with the journal here with you guys.
Yeah.
So I think, the answer to the question, I think the more we can amplify these
absolutely
positive.
And I take this opportunity to remind those who join us later on Asgardia TV that we will post all those links, all those resources that Dr. Vanner graciously shared with us, that we will post it on our website. So stay tuned. Don't despair. A lot of activity on a Q&A too, which I'm trying to go through as we discuss. I would pick up on a practicability issue, and that will answer, I'm sure, Anastasia and also Jasmine Bibi, who's here with us. What about language barriers, especially for non-English spoken students and kids? So do you worry about not being accessible to the, to 3/4 of the globe population?
Yeah, I have some anecdotal responses to that, but they don't solve the problem at scale necessarily. Just yesterday, we were lucky enough, Oscar O'Farrell was at a school in Ecuador and connected with the kids to the overview roundtable. We got to hear some of their excitement and some of their concerns. Now, they spoke English well enough to converse with us on the roundtable, in part because they're going to a beautiful, exclusive international school there. And pin in that, because I think the international schools are important. But they did express, one girl expressed that she wanted to be an astronaut, and she wanted to take the pilot route to get there. But to do that in the US, if she moved to the US to be an astronaut, there was certain, if she wasn't a US citizen, she wasn't going to be able to take flying lessons and be able to, she would need certain clearance if she was working for space companies. So I don't know all the logistics of that she was concerned about, or how realistic they were. But the idea is, yes, there are for sure barriers between nations still when it comes to sharing information. And there's certainly barriers when it comes to, or gaps, I guess, when it comes to access to resources. But even the people that have access to resources, I talked to, we interviewed Jinky Kai, who was the vice president of the largest commercial space company in China. And, she got asked a question around, do you collaborate with U.S. companies? And she's like, we're not allowed to. She'd love to, but they're not allowed to. So there are these sort of artificial barriers, and some of them are, the U.S.'s fault. The U.S. put them there. They're not. It's not always the other way around. There are real barriers, but I think the language barrier, to come back to that, is definitely not insurmountable. Certainly, we have technologies like Google Translate today, which is amazing. And you can just put a URL into Google Translate, and it translates the whole web page for you as you go and click on new things. It's great. But also we found, and this is speaking more to my education technology career pre-COVID, but working with the international schools, yeah, they might be serving the wealthy kids, but they all have like sister schools in the community, and they're full of bilingual adults and bilingual kids. And I think particularly for an international community like Asgardia, the international schools can be a great way to reach the local schools. So yeah, maybe you have an astronautical engineer from the US that only speaks English, but if they can connect with an international school in Ecuador, and then they can invite the local schools, and the kids can translate for each other, or the adults can translate. Now you're able to reach a lot more people. And for a curriculum like the Space Prize curriculum I just shared, it'd be great if we could find volunteers or funding to translate it. It's probably about $40,000 to translate it into any given language, which is not a ridiculous amount of money. But you can just take the URL and drop it into Google Translate, and a kid that's motivated now has a free curriculum, 550 pages of space education linked all over the web. So the videos become less accessible, of course, but even then transcripts are translatable now. So as long as you've got access to the web, there's a lot of opportunity. And then I think real live resources, human resources like international schools, it's a great network, a great way to amplify what you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. And we should not forget that the AI technology is getting more and more advanced, and we see, talking about videos, we see huge steps having been made already. Companies developing new technologies to actually allow live translation of video as well. It's amazing. So I am talking also from a perspective of a linguist. I am also. So I am through the line of my business going, always facing and searching those new technologies to find out. And as an Asgardian and as a Minister of Education, we are always interested in reaching out and prospecting the possibility of breaking the language barrier among the Asgardians. To us, this is an important objective. At the moment, Asgardia has 12 official languages, but it's still 12 official languages. It doesn't mean that everybody speaks 12 languages, so we cannot communicate with each other as we should. So it is one of our major prospects into finding a way to get accessible to the many, or to reestablish the Babel Tower somehow. It's been great talking, and I didn't go in depth about this idea of helping education system with everything that the mainstream education system let them down. But you did mention that even if you want to study space education, it's the offer is very, very minimum, I would say. This is why I believe your endeavor and your project is of major importance for humanity. And I'm so happy that people like you, Dr. Wagner, are here to put it up and to put it straight and to make it accessible. Talking of which, I still don't I'm still not sure we have the time to answer all those questions that are coming in a Q&A. So please, everybody who mentioned and asked questions on a Q&A, don't feel upset if we don't answer all of you. We just stay tuned, follow us in our programs, and we'll try to bring people like Dr. Wagner and help answer those questions, which are real questions, from people who have real interest in the future of humanity. And we all know, and I hope you agree with me, education is the cornerstone for anything that happens. That is not already an if already, but if we want to start exploring the space, and mark my word, I say exploring the space and not colonizing the space, it is an important thing that we start reshaping our mindset while here on Earth. And I think this is what your school is doing, isn't it, Mark? Is reshaping the mindset of people. And we can see that in children, people who, for all of us who are working with children, this is obvious. They are coming already with a new mindset. It's now it's up to us adults not to break it down, not to spoil that the mindset that those kids have already. They have in their DNA. I don't know where it comes from, but it comes, and they have a different perspective on the universe and on the way we interact with the universe. What you think about that, Dr. Wagner?
Oh, I mean, I think you're right. Piaget called it the little scientist. Like, the kids are little scientists when they come out, right? And the way we've codified the scientific method is basically the way we interact with the world to start with, and we have to sort of keep that in mind, keep that alive as kids go through school, and not drum it out of them. I think that idea that 60% of eighth graders want to start their own business, and you get to adults and it's 16% actually do it, we've lost something. And you look at 93% of kids are excited about space, but we don't talk to them about it. We're losing a lot there if we do that. I put a couple other links in the chat that we didn't have a chance to go to, the actual ARES learning link, and then the spreadsheet I mentioned that's got like 80 different space education resources in there. It's just real informal, but a spreadsheet if anyone wants to check that out. And then we didn't really talk about it, but I left a link to my book on this too. You mentioned it did come out in August, but it's a series of papers on these topics, and also looking ahead to how we might educate people on the moon or Mars, or habitats like O'Neill Styles habitat, that kind of thing. Oh, and you mentioned the space education symposium that you spoke at, so I dropped that link in as well. We are planning another free one in the spring, so that's a free space education event online.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think, are we okay to save the chat with all those links? Yes, I'm just seeking confirmation from Marilyn, maybe. So please don't waste this idea. Yes, here in Asgardia, to finish with on a big plane. Here in Asgardia, we're striving to create a space education hub for humanity, and I like the idea that Lembit also mentioned that in the chat, because that shows that we are all on the same page. We are aiming to create a space education, so to gather the most valuable assets and resources we have available, and send them out for people who want to take this for the next step, to take this seriously. We would welcome your presence, Dr. Wagner, in our company, and in our future discussions and chats. We would love to have you next to us and to enthuse us with your perception and your projection and vision. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all need when we talk about future. We need a coherent vision for us to shape our mindset, and subsequently for us educators to help new generations of becoming the true space explorers we are preparing them for. Once again, thank you for your time. Thank you all for your time, for your presence here. It was great. Thank you having you. If you have any more questions, I think we could have another couple of minutes. If not, I will close this webinar now, just to see if we have any more questions coming up. Maybe here, the panelists, colleagues. If not, as I said, it's been already an enriching evening, and in the name of everybody here, I thank you, Dr. Wagner, for your presence, for your extraordinary input.
Well, thanks for having me. I always love any opportunity to talk about this topic in space education and to share. Anybody who felt like they didn't get their question answered in the Q&A, feel free to reach out. You can also find me just at mark@areslearning.com, or I'll drop my LinkedIn profile in here as well for the links.
Here we go. And for those who join us later on Asgardia TV, this program has been recorded and will be broadcasted during the next days several times. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you everybody for being in. And let's, as we say in Asgardia, let's salute our new space nation with this OHO, which stands for One Humanity, One Unity. Thank you very much to you all.